A Nobel laureate economist, the behavioral economist who co-designed the Save More Tomorrow nudge, says 10% is the bare minimum. The math shows it gives most people almost no real shot at retirement. Here's what your actual number should be. You've heard this rule your entire adult life. Save 10% of your income. It sounds responsible. It sounds like math. But here's the problem. Americans with a 401k save an average of just 7.7%, which Vanguard called a record high in 2025. The whole population saving rate, just 3.6%. We're not even hitting the bare minimum. And nobody is questioning whether the rule itself is the problem. That's what this video is about. Where did the 10% rule come from? Not a mathematician running retirement projections, not a study of what people actually need. It's a social convention, descended from the 1/10 tithing heuristic, popularized by the richest man in Babylon back in 1926. It's psychologically round, doesn't sting too much on a paycheck, and sounds like you're doing something. But here's the origin story almost nobody knows. The 3% default, the rate millions of Americans get auto-enrolled into their 401ks at, came from a hypothetical example buried in a 1998 U.S. government ruling. The ruling said, quote, suppose a firm automatically enrolls employees at a 3% savings rate. That was it, a hypothetical. And as behavioral economist Richard Thaler, Nobel Prize 2017, documents in Misbehaving, ever since that ruling, the vast majority of firms with auto-enrollment start people at exactly 3%. A made-up number became a national default. And here's the kicker. Thaler himself, the architect of Save More Tomorrow, says flat out, 10% is a bare minimum. 15%, he says, would be better. The rule you've followed your whole life is, by its own inventor's standard, the floor, not the goal. But there's a deeper catch. Nick Majuli in Just Keep Buying calls savings rules like save 20% misguided because they assume everyone can save at the same rate. That's empirically false. A 25-year-old making $40,000 and a 45-year-old making $180,000 cannot meaningfully follow the same rule and expect the same outcome. So when someone tells you to save 10%, they're not giving you math. They're giving you a social norm dressed up as a formula. The real question isn't, am I saving 10%? It's, given my income and the retirement timeline I want, what savings rate do I need? That question has a real answer, and the math is simpler and more brutal than most people expect. Here's the model that actually works. Mr. Money Mustache, Pete Adini, laid it out in a 2012 blog post titled The Shockingly Simple Math Behind Early Retirement. The core insight: there is really only one factor in how long your working career needs to be. Not your income, not investment returns, not the stock market. Your savings rate as a percentage of take-home pay. Full stop. Why is that so powerful? Because savings rate hits both numerator and denominator simultaneously. When you raise it, you save more. And you also need a smaller pile to retire on because you're spending less. Take Annie and Bobby. Both earn $100,000 after tax. Annie saves 50%, $50,000 a year. Bobby saves 10%, $10,000. Using the standard 25x annual spending rule, Annie needs $125 million to retire. Bobby needs $2.5 million. Annie needs to accumulate $1 million less while saving 5 times more per year. That's the double compounding effect. It's not linear. Now run those numbers through the table at 5% real returns. A 10% savings rate means roughly 51 years to financial independence. 25%, 32 years. 50%, 17 years. Most people stop here, don't, because the 51-year number assumes you start at 22. That means retiring at 73, which isn't a retirement, it's just dying with a savings account. The table assumes 5% real returns and a 4% safe withdrawal rate, the famous Bengen rule from 1994. Some researchers like Wade Pfau argue 4% may be optimistic for early retirees with 40-year horizons. Using 3.5% pushes the multiplier from 25x to about 28x. The direction of the math doesn't change. The urgency of getting your savings rate up doesn't change. But here's the counterintuitive twist almost nobody talks about. A JP Morgan study, summarized in Just Keep Buying, found that 58% of retirees withdraw less than their investments earn each year. Their portfolios keep growing in retirement. They oversaved. They spent their healthiest years in accumulation mode and never learned to spend. Bill Perkins makes the broader point in Die with Zero. There's a sweet spot in your lifetime when you can most enjoy your wealth, and most people save well past it. So the goal isn't to maximize savings rate forever. The goal is to hit your number on your timeline and then actually live. So here's what you actually do. 3 steps. Step 1, calculate your real savings rate right now. Pull your last 3 pay stubs, after-tax take-home pay. Add up everything you actually saved or invested, 401k, Roth IRA, brokerage, high-yield savings, all of it. Divide savings by take-home pay. That's your real rate. Most people who do this discover their number is lower than they thought. Step 2, find your row on the Mr. Money Mustache table. If you're at 10%, you're looking at 51 years. If that timeline doesn't match the retirement you want, the savings rate has to change. There's no negotiating with the math. But you don't have to go from 10 to percent overnight. That would be brutal. Step 3, use what Matt Gilly calls the raise split rule. Save 50% of every future raise, not 50% of your income, 50% of the increase. When you get a $500 a month raise, $250 goes to savings, $250 to lifestyle. You never feel deprived because you're only redirecting money you never had. Your savings rate climbs automatically. Majoli is explicit. Spend more than 50% of a raise and you push retirement further out. Below 50%, you're either holding steady or pulling it closer. That's a lever you can pull right now before your next performance review. The single decision this video asks you to make: stop obeying a default you didn't choose. Pick a rate that matches the retirement you actually want, then automate it so you never need willpower. The 10% rule isn't a lie exactly. It's a default. And defaults are designed to be comfortable, not optimal. A Nobel laureate called it the bare minimum. The math shows it takes 51 years. And its cousin, the 3% auto-enrollment default, came from a hypothetical buried in a 1998 IRS ruling. You didn't choose that rule. The only question worth asking now: what rate do you actually need and when do you want to be done? If this hit differently than the usual retirement advice, subscribe to Insmoti. We publish every 3 days, all built like this: specific numbers, real sources, no filler. Link below to the MMM savings rate table. Find your row.